Welcome to another edition of How to Fix It Yourself with Dave and Dave. Today we're going to be working on a 2016 Nissan Rogue. We're going to be replacing the spark plugs. Now, the owner's manual and the service manual and the dealer will tell you that you only have to replace them at 105,000 miles. I think that's a bit long. This car has 90,000 miles on it, and so as far as I'm concerned, it's a good time to replace the spark plugs. Some of this maintenance stuff, yeah, you can save a few bucks by pushing it off, but I don't know if it's worth all that much to put off some of these maintenance items. Now, certainly you don't want to be replacing them at 30,000 miles or 20,000 miles or even 50,000 miles. Once you start getting above 60,000 miles, even though it's shorter than what the manual says, I think you're good to go. So let's get into it. It's a fairly simple process. There's a few gotchas that we'll point out to you as we go, and I think you'll enjoy this video. So to get at the spark plugs, which you can see right back here, and you know, I guess if you're really clever, you might be able to get a couple of them out, but you'll never get the one that's right there. So in order to do that, you've got to take this air box, this manifold, off. And this manifold is pinned in by just a couple of items. It's got an actual pin here, and under here next to the battery where my hand is going, there's another one right under there. Then it goes into your air intake hose right here, and you've got another bypass hose down here, which is part of the emissions control. And then you've got this the evap cooler. So the first thing you want to do is pop the evap cooler line off of there, and you know, if you can get it back in behind there, it just kind of opens everything else up. You might need to take something to kind of lock it in place. The next thing you want to do is take this hose loose. So you want to get a pair of pliers down in there on the spring clip and go ahead and open that up and just take it back off of there so that it's back behind there. Now, all of this would come out just fine if it wasn't for this big clip back here onto your air intake. So the issue is you could take and get a plier back there and squeeze it and hold it, because there's no place to move it, and just hold it open while you pull everything else off. However, there is a tool that you can get that's just made for things like that. And this tool looks like this. And so what it does, and we'll show you after we get it off of there a little better how it works, but you take and put it on and you squeeze it, and it, got it on there right, yep. And you squeeze it and it latches. So you can see here where it latches. And so it holds it open. So right now, this is completely loose back here and being held open so that we can slide everything off. So now we're going to go ahead and pop. They're a little tight. You have to just kind of push at it a little bit. Get this one off of there. And you can kind of see the whole thing comes loose if you've already got everything loose. So it just kind of came out of there, came out of here, and out of that hose there. So those are the 4 pins. So you've got that hose, this insert there, and this insert here. And that'll take and expose all your spark plugs, and from there it gets to be fairly easy. The first thing you want to do before you start taking apart anything here, because I know at this point it's kind of like, oh gee, let me get into this, is you want to take and get an air hose or a can of air and spray down the top of the block real well to get any leaves, debris, dirt, dust, little gravel pieces off of there, so that nothing drops down into the engine when you pull out your spark plugs. So we just went ahead and blew this off. We did it off camera just so that it didn't get anything on the lens of the camera, but we blew this off real nicely, and so now it's we're ready to start taking things apart. Part of the problem you're going to have getting these off of here is this big harness is kind of in the way here. It's clipped in 2 places, there and there. Now, normally we just use a needle nose pliers to squeeze the tabs on the back side, and that's what we'll do here. But just I thought I'd show you a clever way that I've discovered that works real well for these, getting them off of there. So in this case, I'm going to take a 9mm socket and a pair of pliers, and I'm going to squeeze that 9mm socket on there. And you can see as soon as I got it on, it popped it loose. And so that preserves your clip, and it's a real clever way to do that. Unfortunately, on the one over here, we can't really get the socket on there, so we'll have to go back to the needle nose pliers. But I thought I'd show you that because it's a nice, clever way to pop those things loose without damaging them or having difficulties using a needle nose plier. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the electrical clips off. If you've got really strong hands and really strong fingernails, you can probably push down and get it off. But if not, you want to use a screwdriver. You can hear it click right there, and then you can just start working it off of there. You might have to get in behind it and give it a little push, but eventually you're going to be able to take that right off of there. So that'll get that electrical connector off. So now we're going to go ahead and take the rest of them off. You can do that, and then we'll come back and start taking out the coils and the spark plugs. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the bolts out. They're again on plastic parts, so they shouldn't be very tight. When you put them in, don't make them very tight, just get them snug. So we're just going to go ahead and start loosening it up. And then you can take the boot out, and that's the coil pack. So we'll go ahead and remove the rest of these, and then we'll come back and take a look at actually pulling the spark plug. So I forgot to mention, these are 10mm bolts that are in here. So, and they shouldn't be very tight, so you can just use a quarter socket. So it's a quarter 10mm. So we're going to go ahead and just take one spark plug out just to show you how it comes out. It comes out easy once you get it started. You want to be sure you use a spark plug socket. Now for these in the Rogue, the spark plugs use either a 14mm or 9/16. They're real close to being the same thing. The only thing you want to be sure of is that it has, and I know you can't see this on camera, but you want to be sure it has a rubber spacer in the back end of it to kind of protect the top end of the spark plug. More important going in or putting them in than taking them out, but if you fracture the socket top, taking it out, or fracture the spark plug top, taking it out, you could end up leaving some ceramic in the bottom. So you don't want to do that. So get it in and then just get it loose. Now, my little trick on this that I like to do is once I get it loose, if I can take it out with my fingers, that's my preferred method. Otherwise, I take and put an adapter on here with a 1/4" drive because it's much smaller and easier to flip around. But these are coming out okay. Now, these are factory original spark plugs. On the Rogue, the service manual and the owner's manual says you're supposed to change out the spark plugs at 105,000 miles. People tend to let it go sometimes beyond that. I tend to like to change them out a little earlier. So this has about 90,000 miles on it. You can see there's a fair amount of wear on this, and the tip has been worn down and has deposited on the top end of things. And so it is getting close to being time to replace this. It's also getting a fair amount of discoloration, and it's starting to discolor up here on the ceramic. And so all those things say that it's getting, if it's not already time to replace it, it's getting real close. So I think we're making a good choice here, replacing these at 90,000 miles. So this is the new spark plug we're going to put in. It's an Iridium tipped spark plug. You'll notice that it has a lot of long thread base to it. That is important to make sure you have a replacement one that has a long thread base on it. Do not try and re-gap iridium-based, iridium-tipped spark plug. It should come already gapped the way it is. The only thing you can do is damage the iridium tips if you try and get in there to adjust those. So they're factory adjusted and shouldn't be messed with. It's also important that you recognize that you need to keep it very, very clean. So you don't want to get any debris on it. You'll notice that we put nickel-based anti-seize on it. Now the factory spark plugs and the replacement spark plugs, this is an NKG spark plug, will tell you that they've already pre-coated it with a deposit that will keep it from scalding in the engine block. But I've not had 100% luck with that, so I always put on some anti-seize. I like the high temperature nickel based anti-seize because it allows you to have better conductivity with the spark plug. So from that point, it's just a matter of putting it in the spark plug socket and reinserting it. So if you look closely at the connector, you can see the little green in there. That green is a rubber seal, and that rubber seal is there to keep the moisture and dirt and crud from getting onto the electrical contacts. So most people just slam these together. Sometimes that'll tear out that rubber seal. So the way we take care of that is twofold. Number one is we spray it down with this QDC electronic cleaner, which is made for automotive. And so we'll just spray that down real good. That'll clean out a lot of the crap and crud that's in there. And that'll kind of help lube those on the inside. And then the other thing we're going to do is on the actual coil pack, we're going to put just a little bit of silicone grease on there, and that'll help lube that seal face as well. Don't need to be real goopy with it, just lightly. But while I have a little bit on the end of my finger, I also like to put just a little bit on the tip, kind of work it in just a little bit, and that'll help it slide onto that spark plug a little easier. So now we'll go ahead and drop that in and position it so that the screw will go back in nicely. And you can put the electrical connector on now or not. I tend to like to put the screw on first, so as I'm sure everything's lined up before I put the electrical connector on. All right, so we have the electrical connectors just sitting on, lined up, so that we can take the strain off of the cables. We're going to go ahead and put that connector in. Then we can go ahead and snap that one in. You can hear them snap. And get this one to snap. Okay. Yep, there we go. Kind of pull on it and make sure they're tight. Then we're going to go ahead and put this one in, and then we can get this last one to snap in place. So now we've got all the connectors on. We've got our cable harness snapped back in place, and we've got all of our bolts in. So now we should be good to go. So we just, I'm going to just set the box in place, get the it just roughly put into the opening here going into the intake manifold, and get the emissions hose just lightly put on there, and then we'll go ahead and start it up. Those things need to be in place for the electronics to work properly, because without that you're not getting your mass airflow sensor working well. It doesn't know what to do. So we'll just set that in there and we'll start up the engine. If everything's good, then we'll shove everything back together again. I hope you've enjoyed this edition of How to Fix It Yourself, and we showed you how to replace the spark plugs on a Nissan Rogue. Even though this was specific for the 2016, you'll find that on any of the 4-cylinder Nissan engines, whether it's on the Rogue or the Sentras or the Altimas, any of them, that they're mostly pretty much the same engine that's in all of them, and so this will apply to any of those 2.5 liter engines, 4-cylinder. Hope we've pointed out some things that'll be useful to you. We'll put the tools and the parts in the description below. Please hit the like button and the subscribe button,